earlier, if you haven't subscribed, and I know you haven't subscribed to the channel. If you haven't subscribed, do subscribe to the channel, because this is the second part, or you could also call it as market failure sign, final part of the chapter. And this time the chapter would contain some graphs, which is very difficult for some of the students. So stay tuned for the video and let's start. First of all, we'll be discussing some of the earlier concepts which were discussed in the last video, which was private benefit. In a very brief manner, I'll just discuss that. Private benefit, private cost, and something which was discussed in the last video was external benefit and external cost. Then we also talked about what is market failure, and we also talked about the graphs, but we did not make any graphs so far. So let's talk about that. If you haven't watched the first video, I'd recommend you to watch the first video so that you should be able to grab the whole concept in depth. Private benefit, the benefit you consider as an individual. If you are a customer, you consider the private benefit. If you are a producer, you only consider the private benefit which is received, the benefit you would receive. That means you become selfish in that scenario. So it is private benefit. Private cost, the individual cost. Let's suppose if I'm able to buy a car, so the cost of the car will be the private cost. And if it is a producer, so what will be the private cost? The private cost would be the cost of manufacturing that particular product. Maybe the cost for manufacturing would be, let's suppose, $50 for me as a producer. So I'll consider $50 to be the private benefit and private cost, sorry. And if I talk about the private benefit, then private benefit would be, maybe I'm receiving the profit of, let's suppose, $10. So as a producer, this would be my profit. $10 would be my private benefit, and cost would be $50 as a producer. If I talk about the external benefit, there is a word which you would see in your book, which is Susan Grant, which I recommend in my course book to my students, and that tells us about the third party. Third party means the one who is not involved in the transaction in any manner. Okay, the one who is not involved in the transaction. Let's suppose there is a one who is a buyer, there is a one who is a seller. So these two people are in between connected, but there is a third person maybe who is affected by the transaction. Maybe you have bought a car and you are increasing the noise pollution. So there would be someone else who would be affected by this activity, and this could be the reason. That's why we call that third person who is not involved in the transaction as third party or external benefit. But this time I've given you the example of noise pollution. Let me give you an example of education, because it is external benefit. I thought we are talking about external cost, so this was my mistake. I'll just correct the mistake in this manner. So this will be education. So education could be the external benefit, because a person who is acquiring education is paying the fees. A person who is giving education is receiving the fees, and the third party, which is the society, who is taking the benefit of education. Maybe you are having some discussion inside the society with people, so you are just imparting education, you are just disseminating the information to other persons. That is something very good. If I talk about the external cost, this is a cost on the third party, a cost on the third party. And I, like I've told you already, that buyer is there, seller is there. So what we do, there is third person who is not involved in the transaction. Now this time I can give you an example of noise pollution and air pollution. So there are double L in this, and air pollution. So these both things happen if there is a sale of a car. The buyer would have paid for that amount, the seller would have received the amount, but in between there is a third person who is not involved in the transaction, would be observing the noise pollution, would be observing the air pollution, but he or she is not involved in the transaction. So he or she will be termed as third party, and the cost and the disadvantage he is receiving would be external cost. That is what the term we use. And the benefit is external benefit if you're not involved in the transaction. So I hope so far things are quite clear to you people. If I talk about the private benefit is equal to what? Demand. So I recommend you, if you haven't learned the demand chapter very well, do learn the demand chapter. Do watch the video of demand so that you will be able to cover the graphs very well. Private cost is equal to supply. So these curves will be used in order to just make the graph. So this time I'm making a graph which will be like this. So if I say what is private benefit, so private benefit would be this one. Earlier we used to refer it as demand, but this time I'm saying PB. PB means private benefit, and quantity and the price. I'm making it separately so that you people would be able to grab the concept over here. Now this is second thing, which is private cost, quantity, and here we have price. dollars, or maybe you could just say it as a cost. So this would be private cost, PC. This would be like the supply curve. You would have observed this thing, that this is like supply curve and this is like demand curve. That's why we just say that private benefit is equal to demand curve and private cost is equal to supply curve. I already told you this thing earlier in the last video, that private benefit is always considered while purchasing or selling something, and private cost is considered while purchasing or selling something. What is the problem over here? We are learning the chapter of market failure. So market says you should incorporate the social cost and the social benefit. This is the problem of economics. Economics says that you have to consider the private cost, the social cost, and the social benefit. What is social benefit? Is equal to private benefit plus the external benefit. Okay, private benefit plus the external benefit, whereas private cost plus the external cost. While taking a decision, you should always consider the private benefit, the social benefit, and social cost in that manner. So this is something very important we should always consider. This is the problem of economics. Economics is saying you should not always go for the private cost and the private benefit, because maybe a product which would have more external benefits but less private benefit, you would consume that product less. But if there is a product which has less private cost but more external cost, you would consume that product more. So in short, there will be an imbalance in the society of the production and the consumption. So you should learn about this thing. So let's make a graph, and that will help you understand that how these things are problematic for a person in a society. So let's equate the graph. I already told you that the social benefits or the private benefit is demonstrated by the graph of demand. So I just write it down as B, that is social benefit, and we have price dollars over here. And the second graph is this one, which is saying quantity and price, where it is saying social cost. So social cost will be utilized over here, and just will be writing down like this. Social cost is the cost of is the sum up of external cost and the private benefit. So private cost, sorry. So we just need to just write these, make these graphs very clear. So if I'm making a bracket over here, EC, private cost plus external cost, EC, and social benefits, private benefit, PB plus external benefit. Now we need to see that where the graphs are there. So I'll just make a graph which will involve private benefit and which will involve social benefit. Let's talk about this. This is your social cost and this is your private cost, PC. Okay, this is your social benefit, whereas this is your private benefit. So ultimately, the economics concept is saying you should equate your equation in such a way that you should be producing at the point where social cost and social benefits are intersecting each other. This should be the point which should be the optimal point where you should be producing, and this is your price, let's suppose. Okay, but because of considering the private cost and the private benefit, you are just producing over here, which means that your quantity is less. I'll write P because this is private and this is social, S. Okay, you could see that there is a gap. This gap says that there is under consumption. There are MCQs in the examination where the examiner will always ask you about this thing. So this is your price where you are producing. There's always under consumption. Okay, and under consumption, the difference is that QS and QP. So this happens with the merit goods. What are merit goods? Merit goods are those goods which have more benefits, which have more external benefits than the private benefits. If I talk about that, merit goods are education. Okay, merit goods are more things, could be that something which gives more external benefits than the private benefits. So these are tend to be under consumed, under produced. If they are under consumed, then they are also under produced, because the demand is low as people are consuming it less. So that's why the producer also produces it less. So this is the problem with merit goods. Let's talk about demerit goods. What are demerit goods? Demerit goods are those goods which are bad for the people. Okay, bad for the people. If I if I tell you in the layman language, but if I elaborate this, if I explain this, so it has more external cost. Sorry, not benefit. More external cost than the private cost. One of the example of this could be demerit goods could be smoking. If I talk about cigarettes, smoking. So what is the problem with that? The problem with smoking is the problem with demerit goods is that you incur external costs. If you are ill because of smoking, you just utilize a bed in a hospital, a bed in a hospital. And if you are on the bed, again there are limited number of doctors, and when there are limited number of doctors, you are utilizing the space of another person. So if you would not have done smoking in the past, so maybe you were not in the hospital at this stage. And if you are not in the hospital at this stage, so someone else might be using this facility which you are using. Again, the concept of basic economic problem. I hope you are connecting that this with that topic. Okay, so this is something very important. So smoking causes external cost more than the private cost. So this is a problem for the society. So this is a demerit good. And if I make a graph, so this graph would be like this. So demerit goods, they are always overproduced. Okay, the private cost is here, and this is the social cost. Okay, but the social benefits are less this time, whereas the sorry, I have just made it opposite. Okay, this will be your social benefit. This will be your private benefit. This will be your sorry, I just need to change it. Sometimes it's very difficult to make these graphs, so we should be able to just social costs are more than the private cost. So what happens? Private cost and the private benefit, they are over here. Okay, this should be done. But what is happening? We are producing at this stage. We should be producing at this point QS, but we are producing at the point of QP, which means there is more production. You can see this thing. There is more production. More production means that there will be more consumption, because things are equated in this graph, because social costs and social benefits are equated. So this means that you should produce at QS, but you're producing at QP. So this is something wrong. Demerit goods are always overproduced. They are always overconsumed in a society. Then there is something which is termed as public goods and private goods, which is given in your book. Public goods and private goods. Public goods and private goods are that public goods are non-excludable and non-rival. Non-rival. If I give you an example of this, non-rival means there is no competition in this, and non-excludable means that no one can be excluded. Okay, no one can be excluded from the use of that. If I give you an example of that, street lights. One of the problem over here is that students tend to make it confuse it with the word of public sector. That public goods are always provided by public sector. It is not true. Public goods can be provided by anyone in the society, anyone. Maybe the private business might be providing public goods at any point in the stage. Okay, so don't compare it with the public sector. These are excludable, and rival, which means that people can be excluded from its use, and there is competition. Every other good, if you take out, let's suppose AC, air conditioners, cars, and these all things are excludable. If you pay for them, you can use them. If you can't pay for them, you can't use them. Rivalry, there are more than one companies who are making these products in the market. So again, private goods are these type of goods. And one of the major reasons is that public goods are less, they are consumed less, they are offered less in the market, and private goods are used more. Then another reason for market failure is information failure. Let's suppose if there is a person who is available in Karachi, in Pakistan, maybe make it more broader. If 100 people are required to work over here, but there is only 50 people available, but in let's suppose Islamabad, which is the capital of Pakistan, sorry, not Karachi, Islamabad. So there are let's suppose 150 people, but those out of those 150 people, 100 are employed, but there are 50 who are just looking for job. So these 50 people can be adjusted into Karachi. if they have the information. So this is termed as information failure. Because of no perfect information those people would have, they are not able to produce. If they are not able to produce, so it means the factors of production, the resources are being wasted. This is one of the drawback of information failure. So this is something important over here. Then the last is abuse of monopoly power. This is also important. Abuse of monopoly power means, it means wherever there's one person. Mono means one and monopoly means there is a one producer in the market. One producer or one supplier of any one commodity, any commodity in the market. When there is one producer, there is less efficiency. Less efficiency means less ability to produce in a better manner. So again, the cost would be higher and your resources would be wasted. Resources will be wasted. Okay. So this is it of the topic. Then what you can do, you can solve the past papers of this market failure, because I have explained everything which is there in your syllabus. If you haven't subscribed, do subscribe it, like the video, share it with your friends, comment below. You can follow me on Instagram, which is Fahad FAHADALI 175. You can follow me on Instagram if you're not there. And again, you can also follow me. You could also like my page, which is Save Humanity. This is done for the charity purpose. Share this video with those who are just doing O-level economics, and do stay tuned for the next videos. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.